In the annals of American history, there are dark chapters that echo with tales of violence, betrayal, and tragedy. One such chapter, etched in blood on the canvas of the Wild West, is known as the Mountain Meadows Massacre. This shocking incident occurred in September 1857 in the picturesque mountain meadows of southern Utah. This tranquil setting, once a symbol of peace and harmony, would become the stage for one of the most brutal episodes of America's expansion westward. To understand the Mountain Meadows Massacre, we must first grasp the backdrop against which it played out. The mid-19th century was a time of great migration as pioneers seeking new beginnings and religious freedom embarked on a treacherous journey westward. Among these migrants were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. Led by their newly called prophet Brigham Young, they sought refuge in the isolated lands of Utah, escaping intense religious persecution they had faced in the East. Since the founding of the religion, the Mormons faced opposition and persecution. Their newly revealed doctrines, including the belief in additional scriptures like the Book of Mormon, stirred controversy and fear among religious authorities and communities. They were labeled as heretics and faced social ostracism. As the Mormon community grew in numbers and influence, their clashes with their neighbors intensified. In Missouri, tensions escalated into outright violence, with mobs attacking Mormon settlements and driving them out of the state. After Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs issued the extermination order, an executive order to drive the Mormons from the state by any means necessary, the Mormons sought refuge in Illinois, where they established the remarkable city of Nauvoo. However, the Mormon presence in Nauvoo fueled further animosity, leading to the assassination of the church's founder, Joseph Smith, in 1844. Fearing for their safety, the Mormons were once again forced to abandon their homes and embark on a perilous journey to find a new home where they could practice their religion without persecution. The trek across the Great Plains, known as the Mormon Pioneer Trail, was arduous and full of hardships. Facing harsh weather, disease, and challenges of traveling with limited resources, the Mormons persevered, driven by their faith and the hope of finding a place where they could establish a permanent settlement. In 1847, after months of grueling travel, Brigham Young and a vanguard group of Mormons arrived in the Salt Lake Valley, a barren and remote region far from the abuse of their persecutors. Here, they hoped to create a new society where they could live according to their religious beliefs and principles. The Mormon settlement in Utah was a remarkable achievement, given the challenges they faced. Through sheer determination and hard work, they transformed the arid desert into fertile farmland, establishing communities and building cities. They practiced communal living, with a strong emphasis on cooperation and self-sufficiency. Despite their relative isolation, the Mormons still faced periodic conflicts with the federal government and non-Mormon settlers who questioned their practices and feared their growing influence. The tensions ultimately culminated in the Utah War and the tragic events of the Mountain Meadows Massacre. It was in the summer of 1857 when a wagon train of immigrants from Arkansas, known as the Fancher Party, made its way through the arid deserts toward California. Little did they know that their path would soon cross with the Mormons in a deadly collision of cultures. The Fancher Party's arrival in Cedar City, a Mormon stronghold, sparked concern among local leaders who feared an impending attack from the U.S. government. The situation intensified when false rumors spread that the immigrants were involved in violence against Mormons, including claims that they had killed Joseph Smith, which fueled the flames of mistrust and hostility. Under this atmosphere of suspicion and unease, a sinister plot unfolded. A group of Mormon men and Paiute Native Americans, spurred on by Isaac C. Haight and John D. Lee, surrounded the Fancher Party on September 7, 1857, at the Mountain Meadows and initiated a tense standoff. The surrounded immigrants, unable to move, endured thirst, hunger, and constant fear for their lives. Cut off from supplies, they grew desperate, while the band of misguided Mormons and Paiute Native Americans maintained a tight siege, waiting for an opportunity to strike. On September 11, 1857, the inevitable happened. In a moment of treachery and brutality, the group attacked the defenseless Fancher Party. Men, women, and children were ruthlessly slaughtered, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. The exact number of people killed in the Mountain Meadows Massacre is a subject of historical debate, but it is believed that approximately 120 men, women, and children lost their lives in the tragedy. The survivors, mainly young children, were taken in by local Mormon families, who sought to protect them from the consequences of the massacre. It would be years before the truth emerged and justice could be served. One figure whose involvement in the Mountain Meadows Massacre has long been debated is Brigham Young, the leader of the Mormon Church and the governor of the Utah Territory at the time. The exact extent of his knowledge and direct involvement remains a topic of contention for historians. Brigham Young's influence over the Mormon community was immense. As the religious and political leader, his authority extended to all aspects of Mormon life, including military matters. It is widely believed that Young's sermons, teachings, and policies contributed to an environment of hostility and suspicion towards non-Mormons. Some historians argue that Young's rhetoric, which promoted a sense of loyalty to the church and defended it against perceived threats, may have indirectly influenced the actions of the local Mormon leaders involved in the massacre. Some even contend that Young may have been given explicit orders to carry out the attack, but these claims have never been substantiated. It is important to note that Young adamantly denied any involvement or knowledge of the massacre. He maintained that he had sent a letter to the immigrants, advising them to cooperate with local Native American tribes for their protection. According to Young, it was a group of rogue militiamen who perpetrated the atrocity without his authorization, and he openly condemned their actions. The lack of concrete evidence linking Young directly to the massacre has allowed for differing interpretations of his role. Some view him as a manipulative mastermind orchestrating the attack to protect the Mormon community, while others see him as a leader who, at best, failed to exercise proper control over his followers. Following the massacre, Brigham Young faced scrutiny and pressure from federal investigators. Although no direct evidence connected him to the crime, the stain of the reputation of the Mormon Church and the Utah Territory was undeniable. The aftermath of the Mountain Meadows Massacre marked a turning point, leading Young to implement policies aimed at distancing the church from violent acts. It took almost 2 decades for federal investigators to compile evidence and bring the perpetrators of the Mountain Meadows Massacre to trial, resulting in a handful of convictions but leaving many unanswered questions. John D. Lee, the primary instigator of the tragedy, was one of the tried and convicted. He was executed on March 23, 1877. Over time, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has taken significant steps to acknowledge and address this tragic event. One of the most tangible actions taken by the Church is its involvement in the establishment and maintenance of the Mountain Meadows Massacre Monument and Memorial Site. This sacred space serves as a solemn reminder of the lives lost and provides a place for reflection and remembrance. The Church has also publicly addressed the Mountain Meadows Massacre through official statements and apologies. Church leaders, including President George B. Hinckley and Russell M. Nelson, have expressed remorse and offered heartfelt apologies for the tragedy and the involvement of some members of the faith. These statements acknowledge the pain caused by the event and emphasize the importance of learning from history. One memorial at the Mountain Meadows Massacre reads, quote, "In honor of those who rest in this field, they were innocent and died in unjust attacks that began on September 7, 1857. They were defending their friends and families who buried them before leaving the protection of their camp. To the other victims of the Mountain Meadows Massacre who lie in unknown graves, rest in peace and be assured you are remembered." End quote.